Welcome to our Cofunction Identities Part 1 video. Let's take a look at our first example. Use the cofunction identities to evaluate the expression below. If sine of pi over 2 minus theta is equal to negative 64 hundredths, find cosine of theta. The first step when dealing with this type of problems is to identify what we want to find. In this case, we want to find the value for cosine of theta. So let's go ahead and write down cosine of theta as part of the solution process. The next step is to always identify which cofunction identity is relevant for us. In this case, since we're dealing with cosine of theta, notice that out of the 6 cofunction identities, the one that has a cosine of theta directly for us is this first one. So we can say that cosine of theta is equal to sine of pi over 2 minus theta. And now using our properties and our given values, we notice that sine of pi over 2 minus theta is equal to negative 64 hundredths. So we can say that this is equal to negative 64 hundredths. Now, by using the transitive property of equality that states that if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, we can conclude that A is equal to C. We can establish here that since cosine of theta is equal to sine of pi over 2 minus theta and pi over 2 minus theta is equal to negative 64 hundredths, cosine of theta is equal to negative 64 hundredths. So we can establish that as our conclusion. Therefore, cosine of theta is equal to negative 64 hundredths, which is what we wanted to find. So now let's take a look at another example. Example 2. Use the cofunction identities to evaluate the expression below. If cosine of pi over 2 minus theta is equal to 84 hundredths, find sine of theta. Once again, let's write down what we want to find, which is sine of theta. Our second step is to identify which cofunction identity is relevant for us. Now, the cofunction identity that deals with sine of theta directly, it's this one. So we can say that sine of theta is equal to cosine of pi over 2 minus theta. But notice that cosine of pi over 2 minus theta happens to be equal to 84 hundredths. So by the use of the transitive property of equality, we can conclude that sine of theta is equal to 84 hundredths. So what we have used in this particular examples are 3 steps, which is to identify what you want to find, to identify the relevant cofunction identity, and to substitute in and use the transitive property of equality. With that said, we conclude this particular video on Cofunction Identities Part 1. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.